Welcome to a new program about creation, creationism, science, hosted by Alpha Omega TV. Our guest today is Mr. John Mackay, geologist, International Director for Creation Research, Australia. Welcome with us.
Thank you, Romulus.
It's so good to see you again, and to know that there's still someone out there caring for these evidences about creation. Before getting into our subject today, I mean, thinking, do we need the Bible for creationism, or we just can deal with the facts of science? Could you help us out with that?
Well, perhaps I can rephrase the question
please
slightly
do so.
in the way I'm more liable to be asked by someone who might be antagonistic. Because they often say, well, the Bible's a religious book and science deals with facts. And then they'll turn around and say, but is there any evidence that God exists, right?
Yeah.
To which you have to say, well, what sort of a God are you looking for, right? Okay. And they've never stopped to think about that question. And so I like to remind them that the Bible makes the claim that the nature and the power of God is seen everywhere. But of course, you need to know something about that God in order to know what you're looking at. I mean, if I told you there were green kangaroos in Australia, it would be no help if you didn't know what a kangaroo was, correct?
Exactly.
So you need to know something about a kangaroo's got a tail at this end, a head at that end, and big jumping legs, and looks like an oversized hairy rat, etc., etc. Okay, now, because you phrased your question your way, and I'm going to answer it a slightly different way,
please
would you read a Bible verse for us? It's Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, because it's played a very influential role in the whole history of science, and even why we can see television today. So Romans 1:20.
Now he made me curious. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse.
Now, Romulus,
Yes,
be
sir.
honest, when was the last time you saw something invisible? Isn't it true that if you go around saying, oh, look, there's an invisible thing, there's another one. They have those motels with padded walls and bars on the windows.
All personnel dressed in white.
Yes, and they lock your hands across, that's right. But the Bible is an interesting book because it does make that very profound claim that the invisible nature and the power head of God can be seen. And in fact, it can be understood, and nobody's got any excuse. Now, I remember having a very interesting discussion with the man who designed the guidance system on the space shuttle. The space shuttle, that's science, isn't it? We go to the moon, we go to the, we go into outer space, we need advanced technology, advanced science. And this guy, I mean, there's no doubt about it, he was a genius in his own field. And he and I were discussing, where would you go to look for God? Because you remember when the Russian cosmonauts got up into outer space and they first of all said, we didn't see God, therefore he isn't? And I'll always be grateful to the American astronauts who said, well, why didn't you step outside your spaceship? You would have met him face to face, right? And so you need to know the right question to ask in order to look for the right answer. So the question is, what sort of a God is that verse talking about? Because one scientist actually pursued that verse to the end point where we can see television today. And I'm sticking to that point because people are watching and they don't realise that that verse and television and whole heaps of other things, scientific, are all connected. Now, that verse speaks about the God who created, correct?
Yes.
It says his nature and his Godhead. All right, now, you've trained in theology, so what's the word Godhead usually mean?
His attributes, his character, his everything pertaining to God.
What he's like.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, now the old theologians, in reading through their Bibles, came up with a word. This word is not in the Bible, but it's a very useful description. They invented the word Trinity as an attribute of this God who created. Okay, Mr. Theologian, tell us a bit about it.
We rather use the term triune God, just to make clear we're not speaking about three gods, as some are accusing us, but we're speaking about the one God who revealed himself into three persons, co-equal, co-existent.
Okay, and who are they in your Christian Bible?
Yes, it's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit.
So 3 persons in the same Godhead.
In the same Godhead, yes.
Okay, now that's a fairly neat summary of the doctrine of the triune God.
Thank you
okay,
very
good.
much.
Now we didn't prepare this beforehand.
No, we
I'm
didn't.
catching you off. Well, that's good. You know your theology.
Yes.
Okay, but as you so to many scientists, because the point that is hidden from most people is that science actually is the outgrowth of a particular religious view of this world. Mm-hmm. You have to believe that there is law and order out there before you go looking for it.
Exactly.
I mean, Isaac Newton did not discover the law of gravity. The first man who fell down the steps discovered the law of gravity, right?
In a painful manner.
In a very painful manner. But what Isaac Newton did was this. God is a God of law and order. Mm-hmm. How do I know that? He wrote more on theology than he ever wrote on science.
Yes, exactly.
And he read in his Bible that our God is a God of law and order. Mm. And if God made the moon and God made the little green apples, then whatever makes the moon stay up must be related to what makes apples come down. Mm. Now, be honest, you'd never thought of that, would you? You see, that's what made Isaac Newton the genius.
No, I didn't.
And he began to figure out, there's an order here, there's a law. So it wasn't that he was going to look as if there was. He believed because God was a lawmaker, there'd be laws out there. And so he's famous for the little saying, all I am doing is thinking God's thoughts after him. Okay? Okay, now, back to our guy who's with the space shuttle.
Okay.
He and I had a good discussion about water. Now, water is an interesting substance, isn't it?
It's a liquid subject.
It's a liquid. Well, if I tipped it out, we'd soon discover that.
Yeah.
But of course, if I put it in the refrigerator and turn the temperature down to -10, what happens?
It's going to turn into ice.
Turns into ice. But then if I put it in the kettle and turn the temperature up to 120,
it's going to turn into steam.
Turn into steam. And of course, then he reminded me of the lesson that I'd done in second-year physical chemistry at university, where basically here's what we did. We took the test tube, we put water in it, we pulled all the air out so there's only water in there, and we locked it up so there's nothing can get into it except for water. And then we dropped it in the freezer. And as we decreased the temperature and increased the pressure, it reached a point where it went poof, and all of a sudden there's water in the bottom, ice in the middle, and steam at the top.
Interesting.
And all 3 are there at once.
Yes.
Now, in fact, that number 3 is an interesting number because didn't you tell us about a triune God?
Yes.
What does tri mean, please?
It's 3.
3. So if the Bible is true, and the God who created it is involved with the number 3, if his nature is seen in the creation, guess what number should crop up fairly often?
Let me guess. 3.
Very good, very good.
good.
No wonder they pay you for doing these sort of things. Okay, so look, this guy who was, involved in advanced space geometry and mathematics said, look, one of the best evidences for God is the whole nature of the universe. We basically live in a 3-dimensional universe.
Exactly.
And in fact, if you take your, when you start at elementary school, they give you a little ruler, a little pencil, and you have to learn about length, and you have to learn about breadth, and you have to learn about height. Remember those lessons?
Oh, yes, I do.
And then
not too much, but I do.
Then the teacher says, draw me 10 centimetres long.
Okay.
Funny thing is, you actually can't do that.
Can't I?
No, you can't. Because what you discover is you draw it and you hand it into the teacher, and the teacher says, very good work, young Romulus. And the only reason she can see it is because the pencil mark is that wide and that thick, as well as that long. Because it turns out you can't have any one dimension unless you have all 3. Now there's something that's worth thinking about.
Oh, yes.
You can't have a single dimension unless you have all 3 of them. By the way, what time is it?
It's 20 minutes past 6.
Okay, now look again. Is it still the same?
Well, the second
Are you telling me that it's hard for you to be honest about the time?
You got me.
That's right. You see, when you look at your watch, it keeps changing.
Yeah.
So our simplest way of perceiving time is that it exists as past, or present, or future.
Yeah.
And you can't have any one unless you have all 3. So when you have a think about it, number 3s, once your eyes have been opened and your evolutionist glasses about nature just happening have been taken off, you'll begin to see 3s all over the place. In fact, we've got 3 basic dimensions. Time has got 3 components. Now, you've told me you're a musician, right?
Oh, well, just
you played guitars, and you remember playing chords?
Yes.
Well, I know you didn't do theory because we had that discussion, but in reality, there are 3 notes to a chord, and when you play all 3, it sounds like
harmony.
One beautiful sound. But because I used to write my own music, and you'll find many scientists do this, right? Because there's a connection.
Yeah.
There's order in music and there's order in science. The minimum harmony is 3 half tones. The number 3 again. And then you cross bridges to go into towns, and you cross rivers with massive bridges. Like I was in Scotland last year, and you cross the 4th bridge on the train. It's been there for 130, 40 years, whatever. Magnificent construction. And in reality, it doesn't take long for you to begin to spot 3-sided shapes. The engineers long ago discovered that the triangle was basically our strongest structural feature.
Yes.
But okay, you've done a bit of maths at school, correct?
Just a bit.
Just a little bit. And isn't it true you have all sorts of different size triangles?
Oh, yes.
And some of them have got a right angle?
Yes, sir.
And some of them are long and skinny and they've got 2 equal angles?
Yes, sir.
And some of them have got 3 equal angles?
Yes.
All right. Now let's
equilateral
test this.
triangles.
Very good, but it's coming back, isn't it? See,
Yes.
you don't ever forget anything. It's just remembering it. That's the hard bit. Now, when you have a think about this, if you wanted to test Romans chapter 1
Yes.
to the limit of all the triangles that you could make to support a bridge or a building,
Yes.
only one of them has got 3 sides that are equal. That would be the closest representation to a triunity, correct?
Yes, exactly.
No matter which side you look,
Yeah,
they all
exactly,
appear to be the
exactly.
same, even though from this perspective you can see they're not, right?
Yeah.
Question. Of all the triangles you can make up, which one's the strongest? Guess.
The equilateral triangle.
The one in which
Yes,
all
exactly.
the sides are the
Yes,
same.
exactly.
So this number 3 is not just hocus pocus,
No.
it's actually really out there. How many primary colours are there? You know, the ones you mix together in paint. Do we
red?
have 10? Yeah, what do we have?
Well, about 3.
3
Yeah.
exactly, right? When you're using paint, you have red and yellow and blue, correct, right?
Yeah.
And you know that if you mix yellow and blue, you get green, and red and blue, you get some yucky purple, and you can go ahead and try and make all sorts of mixes. Well, there's one very famous scientist who knew all of this, and his name was James Clerk Maxwell. Now, for those listeners who've never heard of him, you're watching television and understanding all of our communications to the satellite landers on Mars because of James Clerk Maxwell's theorems on electromagnetic radiation. Our concepts of what light is and all of that are related to this man. Now, James Clerk Maxwell, and sadly the textbook doesn't tell you anymore, James Clerk Maxwell was a Christian. And James Clerk Maxwell was trying to figure out what light was. You see, light's one of those things, it's travelling so fast you can't catch it. It's going at, nearly 300,000 kilometres a second, 186,000 miles a second. That's 7 times around the world by the time you count 1. Now that's so fast you get to go a lot of places you don't get to see much, right? It's really fast.
Don't travel that way.
But so you can't catch it. You can't chop it in half and look inside. You can't take a bucket full. So he was trying to figure out what light was. And he knew one thing. Right from the days of Isaac Newton, we've known you can split light up. And we've also known you can put it back together again. So you'll sometimes go to museums and you'll see experiments that these scientists have done, and it'll just go right over your head. You walk into a room, it's stark white. And there's, the museum wants you to come in. These are the touchy-feely type museums.
Yeah.
They say, walk through the room. And you look inside and there's nothing there. You say, why bother? Well, if you do get brave enough to walk through the room, all of a sudden you'll find your shadow appears on the walls. You have a red shadow here, a yellow shadow here, and a blue shadow over there. Because what they've done is they've stacked the ceiling with red lights, blue lights, and yellow lights, and when they switch them all on, the 3 become 1. and it appears white to you.
Interesting.
Unless you get in the road of it,
Yeah.
and then you block out
Yes,
the other
the other
two.
two.
Right? And so
Interesting.
that's what happens. So James Clerk Maxwell, being the genius that he was, as well as a Christian, said, I wasn't there when the world was made, but God was. So let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. And would you read us verses 1 to 5, please?
Let's read together. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day.
Okay. God saw the light that it was
Good.
Now, you're enough of a theologian to remember a conversation that Jesus had with a rich young ruler.
Yes.
So the rich young ruler said, Good master.
Yes.
And Jesus said, Why do you call me?
Good.
There is nobody good except for?
One.
So therefore the nature of God, who is good, is seen in his creation of light. Because he called it good. Okay, now did you notice that it said, God said, let there be light, and there was. Now, you and I are not very good at this sort of creating. I mean, one word from God and light appears, one word from us and the dog does what it wants, right? So we're not very good at this sort of speaking creation. But in reality, James Clerk Maxwell said, God doesn't lie. He created light. Therefore, his nature, the good aspect of God, as well as the Trinity of God, must be seen somewhere in the creation. He knew about the three states of matter, he knew about the triangles, he knew about the temperatures, he knew about the times, he knew about length, breadth and height, etc., etc. James Clerk Maxwell then by faith. Catch what I just said?
By faith.
By faith. He had a fact called light.
Yes.
He didn't quite know what it was,
Yes.
but he did know now where it came from by faith.
Yeah.
So by faith he sat down and wrote a description of how light behaved. Would you like to guess how many parts it's got in it?
3.
3. And when you're at high school and you do this to describe Maxwell's theorem of electromagnetic radiation.
Yes.
This is the electric field, the magnetic field, and the tertiary vector interaction. The one thing they don't tell you is that James Clerk Maxwell got it out of the Bible. Because they like to think, scientists just invent these things and discover these things all by themselves, and that's nonsense. They always start with some sort of faith, and if they start with the wrong faith, they won't be able to make right use of the facts. Major point, you see, James Clerk Maxwell's theorem has proved to be one of the most successful theorems we've ever had. In the century or so since he made it up, guess how many times we've had to change it?
Let me guess. Never.
That's right. It works. Now don't be surprised. It's based on the right faith in the right creator who was there, who actually put his nature in the creation. So just so we can make a few points here, would you go back and read Romans chapter 1 again? Because I don't think there's anybody out there who hasn't understood what we've been talking about, and it's easy to check because you can buy Maxwell's biographies.
Romans 1.
Romans 1 and verse 20.
20. For the invisible things of him, from the creation of the world, are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse.
Now that's a very somber challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because when you see someone on television and they're saying, over the past 300 million years, fishes have grown legs and turned into
Me.
Romulus Company. Can you tell us a couple of things that verse is saying about them? I mean, I'm catching you on the spot, but read it again to the viewers as they think through the question as well. What is that verse saying about all the Discovery Channel documentaries, the National Geographic programs, the university biology professor who's an ardent atheistic evolutionist?
Basically what it says here, that they are understanding everything by the things that are made.
So they know.
So they know.
they know that what they're saying is right or wrong.
Yes. They know that what they're saying is wrong.
Ah, that does raise a good question, doesn't it? Why are they saying it? If they know from the evidence that creation is true, and they know and they understand it, therefore they know that what they're saying is a lie. There's something pretty serious actually happening behind the scenes.
Yes, it is.
And it does mean that anybody who's watching our program today, if the pennies finally clicked, really we're just getting you to the point you'd already reached yourself, but you'd refuse to acknowledge.
Yes.
Because you knew it. I mean, be honest, is it hard to count to 3?
No, it's not.
It's easy.
Not even for me.
And you all learn about primary colours in school, and you all learn about 3 states of matter. And I'll be honest with you, Romulus, I first came across this subject in a PhD written in the middle 1800s. Question, why had it been removed from circulation? Because the fact is, this PhD was a very thorough work on the Trinity showing in the creation, the number 3. And I'm sure the viewers can go home and start looking for more 3s, right? And till, you know, it's like every time if you buy a new red car, all of a sudden you see them everywhere. Your eyes are opened up. That's true, isn't it?
Exactly.
And what we've got here is something that's a challenge to every one of our viewers and all the atheists and that they may be trying to reach. Never believe someone who says, I couldn't believe that. Oh, it's all right for you. You understand it.
Yes.
In reality, they've seen it.
Yes.
They know it.
Yeah.
And they understand it
Yes.
because it's simple enough for a child to see.
You mentioned an interesting thing. It may pass as a joke, but it's not. It's very serious. You mentioned that Americans ultimately advised Russians, if you wanted to meet God in outer space, you should have stepped out of this space shuttle and you could met him right on the spot. John, this sounds jokey, but it's not. Ultimately, we will all need to face God. We will like it or not. One day, we will step out of our little shuttle that has only that much energy that God provided to run. And we're either running to Him or away from Him. Could you please just put it in a nutshell? A small take with you for those who are still in their little shuttles and still really did not decide yet.
They're trying to think of how to decide.
Yeah.
Well, I travel the world several times every year. There's some things I've discovered. Buddha can't help you one bit. Hinduism will never get you there because you have to take yourself and you don't know where you're going. If you look at some of the modern religions, you know, the scientific Scientology ones, again, it's what you do to help yourself and you don't know what to do to help yourself.
Yeah.
So the one thing I'm really glad about is that this God who the Bible talks about in Genesis 1, that He made the world, this God who Romans talks about, you can see and hear and understand, has not only made that so clear, He's made it possible for us to know Him. And the reason I've stayed a Christian is that I certainly accepted by faith that Christ had lived and died and rose from the dead, but the most joyous discovery of my life is out of John chapter 14, where Jesus said, if you love me and you obey my commandments, I will make myself known to you.
Beautiful.
So therefore, this God is not waiting for you to reach the end of your journey and jump out of the spaceship to see if He's there. He's prepared to come to you right now. Of course, it can be a little bit humbling because you have to admit that you are what He says. He made the world good. We sinned. We turned our back on Him. That's why we pretend we can't see all of this. And we have to admit that He is God and His Son Jesus Christ is also God, who died in our place, your place, their place. And He will come and He will give you the joy of new life. And then you won't even be afraid to meet Him face to face.
Excellent. So many times we do preach to our listeners. We tell our listeners. We beg our listeners to understand one major, ultimate, supreme difference between Christianity and any other religion. could you tell us, just in the couple of minutes left behind, what this Jesus Christ did so important that makes Christianity different of any other religion? Because, yeah, we are supposed to make some choices. It seems to all of us, knowing Him, that it was first God who made a very special, an ultimate choice.
Well, you find there's only two sorts of religions in the world. There's those where you try and do your best to arrive at an end point and hope that whoever is up there or down here or around there will be happy with it, and you don't know for sure. Now, none of those are Christianity. Christianity is the one exception where this God has become a man and come to this planet because we were such sinful creatures we could not get to where He was. Now, if you want to think that through, I'll give you a brief summary of Genesis 1 to Revelation 22. You see, Genesis 1, God made the world good. Genesis 3, man made it bad. He sinned.
Yes.
John 1, the good God became a good man. John 3, the good God who didn't sin died in the place of sinful men so that we might once again become the sons of God. There is a summary. God will come to you if you will humble yourself and accept His Son as Lord and Christ. That's the difference.
Mr. Mackay, thank you so much for being with us today. We're looking forward to seeing you very, very soon and to talk to you some more and allow you and being honored to listen to you. Precious viewers, the Almighty God came in the exact second of the time needed to come to meet us. He sent His only begotten Son forward to come and meet you. And He is waiting for you to say something out of your heart. That's something that is, who am I? Can I know you? Do you understand me? This is what I did. I asked the question just by simple faith. Is there anyone who listens? And if there is, can you help me, please? And here I am after 14 years. I became a Christian following Mr. John Mackay's ministry back in Hungary in 1991. Did I ever thank you for that?
I think so.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Have a very blessed time of thinking and remembering what we've been talking about. And would you please join us again in a new and exciting program together with Mr. Mackay, together with the team from Alpha Omega TV. We hope to see you soon again. God bless you.